Hey, good morning, everybody. I've been kind of sucking at the DailyCast, which I kind of knew that I would, but regardless, here we are. We're back at it, and I'm going to be compassionate with myself and use this as a learning opportunity. So, I've been afraid of dying lately, and it's not like it's something that's consuming my soul or consuming all my thoughts or anything like that. It's more that I've just had moments of imagining the future and, not, so I haven't been afraid of dying like in a, tragic, accidental, unexpected way or anything like that. It's more like I've been afraid of the actual getting old and dying. And it's really, I'm not sure why. So part of me thinks that, obviously it's inevitable. And I normally am at peace with it. And I'm wondering if the reason that I'm afraid of dying is not so much about dying in and of itself, because, I've learned enough about dying, like not that I'm an expert on it by any stretch of the imagination. I guess you can't really be an expert on it unless you go through it, which then means obviously you can never talk about it. But I had a guy in the podcast, Josh Mance, who died, like literally died and then was resuscitated. And he described that moment, of being one as almost like totally surrendering, and realizing like there was not an unstoppable force. I'm kind of bastardizing his words here, but really finding in those last moments, finding complete peace, like finding a complete release of everything. And, it being the moment of, kind of what you imagine Zen masters pursuing for their entire life. And so, that was pretty profound. And I've also heard people who have had psychedelic experiences with like psilocybin, for example, talk about how it rearranged their beliefs about dying, and they don't have any fear of it anymore. So, and actually, that's definitely an experience I'm going to have as a guided psilocybin trip at some point in the near future. I really want to experience that. But regardless, I think that my fear of dying is actually a really interesting opportunity for me to explore a more, I don't want to say more fundamental fear. I don't know if you can have a more fundamental fear than dying, but a fear that's holding me back, and that's of not living a life of significance, of being at those last moments and looking back in your life and going, fuck, man, I blew it, or I didn't make it all that I could. And I think thinking about that in terms of fear is probably something that I feel, okay, so I don't know the best way to put this, but I'm thinking that I'm afraid of dying because I know that there's some kind of fear within me that's holding me back from living a life of let's say, of as an immense significance as possible. I don't know if that was a sentence, but, but I think even the fact that I'm having that fear is telling me that, like, if I was completely comfortable in the fact that I was making the most of every moment, and then I'm not sure that I would have that fear. I think that I would be content in the knowledge that I am living the best life I can by making it a collection of the, best, most richest, most meaningful moments that are possible. And the knowledge and I guess awareness that I was doing that, I think would make me less fearful about death. Although maybe I'm full of shit. I don't really know. So then I start thinking about it and I'm like, okay, so what, and I don't know how to think about this right now, which is why I'm involved in this sort of expressive expression right now, let's say, but because I notice that when we talk about things like growing our business, for example, my default reaction is to some kind of fear-based thing, and I'm aware of it. I'm totally aware of it. But I catch myself in the moment, which I feel like is progress, but there's always something in my head that's saying why we can't do it. And there's something here, and I'm not sure what it is right now. So I'm just going to continue talking, but I wonder if I'm actually afraid of living a life of significance or if I'm afraid of putting in the work that I think is required to create this magnificent life. Excuse me, I got morning throat here, morning old person throat. So yeah, I don't really know, but because when I think about that, then I'm like, okay, well, what would that even look like? Like, what would living a life of that kind of significance look like? And then I objectively think, well, I'm living a pretty fucking good life right now, and I want to make sure that I celebrate that too. And I think there's a fear that if I celebrate it, perhaps I'll become complacent, which is something I really want to talk to. There's a guy I really want to talk to about this idea. But where the fuck am I going with this whole thing? So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's becoming like, how do I know that I'm making the most of every moment? Or not that I even need to make the most of every single moment. Like, who the fuck even does that? Nobody does that. Other than maybe trying to be fully present in every moment. And then maybe no matter what you're doing, you could be considered to be making the most of every moment. So, maybe that's part of it is I don't even know, even if moments are great, could they be greater? And is that robbing me of my enjoyment of them? And how could you ever really know if you're making the most of every moment? I don't really know the answer to that, because if you can never really know, then there's always going to be a doubt that you're not making the most of every moment, which might contribute to the fear that I'm feeling about dying. Wow, I feel like I've wrapped my mind into a fucking total pretzel here, and I don't even know what to... This awkward pause is me thinking. I think that's why I keep coming more and more back to the idea of values and making values aligned choices and being aware of what I'm doing and how they relate to the values that I, fundamentally believe that I want to live my life by, because I think that can take many forms, like I could live each moment in alignment with my values, but they could be very different, right? I mean, there's a million ways to express your values. So, but maybe bringing even more intention to that would help me feel comfortable and help me know that I'm maybe not making the most, whatever that even means, of every decision or every moment, but maybe it means that I'm on a journey to continually move myself closer to my values, and maybe that's enough. Maybe that produces, the quote results that will tell me that I'm living the life that I should be living. Like I really am feeling very strongly about. That's why I'm recording this podcast. Like I'll be honest with you. I'm sitting on my table, the island in our kitchen, completely naked. This is not the first naked podcast I've done. But I didn't want to do it this morning because I haven't done it for the past little while because for lots of reasons. But when I thought about doing this morning, I thought I didn't really feel like it. But then I just decided to make a values aligned choice because I feel like this kind of expressiveness and this expressive, quote writing, which is what we talked about at the beginning of the DailyCast, is important for me to grow as a human being. And that kind of growth is, important to my values, or at least I think it's important to my values. I've realized that my original values, as I had defined them, I don't think they are, it's not that I don't think they're appropriate. It's that I think there are more fundamental values that underlie those ones that I've been saying, like, wisdom, courage, discipline, confidence, and optimism. I mean, maybe those are values. They're still important to me, but I'm not sure that they're my core values. I feel like there's something fundamentally, I keep using the word fundamental. I think there's something more at a more basic level. So I found a new exercise that looks really good, and it's a different way of thinking about your values, more than just words. It's more like experiences and evocative images and finding the best of yourself. And it's something that I like a lot better. So I'm actually today going to go through and do that exercise. And as a result, I will develop a better sense of my core values. And how that happened was I started writing down each day, some choices I'm going to make to move more in alignment with my core values. And I realized that there's some of the core values like confidence. It's not a core value. I mean, I think it's a result of living by your core values, actually. And I just, because I noticed that as I do that more and I accept myself more, I'm just more naturally confident by default. It's like a byproduct. And so I don't want my core values to be a byproduct of anything, right? So, and it took me some time to realize that. And it took me actually creating, being intentional about, it's another word I've been using a lot lately, but being intentional about making choices to move closer to those values and realizing, oh shit, maybe this isn't even a value in the first place, which is part of the journey. I get it. It's no big deal. But so to circle that way back to what I was talking about is I think that I really feel like for me, the most important thing I can do right now is to just get super, super clear on this next version of what my values are and really try to implement rituals in my life to make sure that I'm doing things to move closer to my values. Like, so for example, making part of my morning routine or my morning ritual rather. And the difference between a routine and a ritual being, a routine is something you do, but a ritual has deeper significance to it. So if I make it a morning ritual, that's a way of, for example, living my values. That is a way for me to connect, to continue the journey and connect to the vision of myself that I want to create in the future and all of those things. So it creates more significance to it. And so that's really the difference in my understanding anyways of a routine and a ritual. But I don't know where I was going there. But I think this is helping me. I think this is helping me because I see I'm probably for almost all of us, except for the saints among us, there's an amazing opportunity to just live a more values-based life. And there certainly is for me. I'm doing it more than I've ever done it, but fuck, there's lots of places I'm not doing it in my life. And I think maybe that's part of what's driving that fear too, is maybe not looking back on my life and feeling like it has really anything to do with significance or impact. Maybe it's literally as simple as being afraid right now of looking back on my life and feeling like all the shit I said was bullshit and that I professed to have these things that I said were important to me and I didn't live up to them. Maybe that's what's scary to me. I don't know. I think there's something to that actually now that I'm saying it out loud, and I don't want to live my values out of fear. I want to live them out of love and purpose and conscious choice. But it's interesting to think that maybe the thing that terrifies me the most is just that, is reflecting on my life at the end of my life and thinking, you fuck. There were so many fucking opportunities where you could have lived as a man who was in complete harmony with his values, and yet you chose not to. And the reasons don't matter, but it's that you chose not to. And I don't think that's a conversation I want to have the opposite conversation with myself at the end of my life. Wow, this is feeling extremely profound to me right now. And it's not profound in the, like, that I've gained some great new insight, although I think I kind of have. It's profound in the feeling that it is causing in my body right now, which is, I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like I feel frozen in place somehow. I mean, obviously I'm not frozen in place, but there's an intensity. I feel like I've just realized something. It's like one more dimension as to why it's important to live a values-based life, to commit to living a completely values-based life. And when I say living a completely values-based life, then I want to couch it and say moving towards a completely values-based life. But then I just think, is that just fucking weak, pathetic talk? Like, if I want to live a values-based life, why can't I just do that? So I don't like using that kind of language. How would it be possible? Is it possible to just do that right now? Is it possible to live a completely values-based life? Are our human frailties such that that's really a fucking pipe dream, and it's just something that you always want to continue to move towards? I mean, I'm going to continue to move towards it anyways, but I wonder sometimes if I'm using that as an excuse to be able to pat myself on the back and say, "Oh no, Jay, look, man, you're living, you're being guided by your values more than you ever have in your life," which I believe is definitely true. So you're doing good enough. I mean, maybe that's bullshit. I don't even know. It's better than nothing, I guess, but there's a huge opportunity for improvement, and there's a huge opportunity for continued growth. And, yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna do the core values exercise today, and really put an incredible amount of thought into it. So I walk away from that experience and that self-reflection with a set of values that I can read, write, use as a decision-making framework, and that I connect deeply with. I feel like I'm at the point right now in my own journey of personal evolution and self-awareness that I will know when I have the values that really, really connect to the core of who I am and who I want to be. I think I'm much better prepared to do that now than I have been at any point in my life. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to go extremely deep. So anyways, that started off about as a fear of dying, but it ended up with just another reinforcement about what do I need to do right here, right now to be the man that I want to be. And the best way to do that, as I always say, is to start being that man. So, however, on the conversation of dying, I had, I brought this up in our mastermind group yesterday, and we just had some really great conversations about it, about other guys' perspectives on death and dying. And one of the men in the group talked about his mother and how, in her last 6 months, all the fears that she had, she became an incredibly powerful woman because she finally released all the fears that she had been kind of dragging around like a boat anchor for her whole life, and became just a very powerful, present person. And it was an interesting thing, because I've noticed that with my mother-in-law. She kind of said the same thing. Like, when you're confronted with your own death, you realize just how fucking stupid all the baggage you've been dragging around your whole life is. And she's also released so much of that and is much more at peace, and in some ways is living in the shadow of death, or in the face of death, is living a richer life than many people who will ever get to experience. And it's weird to think that in death, or in facing your own death, there can be gifts. But that's just an interesting thing to say. So that conversation was pretty impactful for me too. Very impactful for me. And it was nice to hear that man in the mastermind tell his story in a way that celebrated his mom and how her choice and how she chose to, end her life, left him with some really, really amazing memories of his mom and their some of their last times together. So there's something very powerful there too, is that when you talk to people who are facing their own death, I mean, we're all facing our own death, but when people have an awareness that their death is coming maybe before their quote natural time, what are the lessons we can learn from people? And I plan to learn the lessons that my mother-in-law has to teach me for as long as she is with us. Because I think they're super important, and it's just something I love talking to her about, and I love that she feels open enough to talk to me about it. So, wow, that was emotionally draining. Holy shit. So, I think I have nothing left to say, and we'll see you next time.